The Great Council Chamber of the Galactic Union was built to impress. Its walls stretched high like the inside of a cathedral, glowing with lines of blue light. Hundreds of seats curved in circles, filled with alien leaders of every shape and size. Voices rose and fell in dozens of languages, some sharp like breaking glass, some soft like flowing water. The air carried the weight of politics, power, and pride. At the far end, a few human representatives sat quietly. They were newcomers to this galaxy of old empires, and though they wore sharp uniforms and straight faces, their presence was still strange here. Most species still thought of humans as young, reckless, and unrefined. The meeting dragged on, the aliens arguing about borders, treaties, and trade. Words filled the chamber like endless waves, but nothing seemed to matter to the ordinary people outside. It was politics, loud, complicated, and cold. Then something unexpected broke the rhythm. One of the young human delegates, his nerves stretched thin from hours of speeches, leaned toward the mic in front of him. His voice, trembling but clear, echoed in the chamber. Hal Tasmayuni? Do you hear me? The words were in Arabic. The sound rolled across the hall, strange and heavy. Every alien turned to look. The translations failed, no instant meaning appeared on the glowing holoscreens above. The machine stumbled, leaving only silence. Confusion spread like fire. Alien leaders shifted uncomfortably. Some narrowed their eyes. Others hissed in their own tongues. Even the other humans in the delegation froze, their faces tight. They did not answer. They acted as if they had not understood their own man. The young delegate sat back, embarrassed, sweat on his forehead. He had spoken without thinking, his heart carrying a weight that English could not hold. He whispered something under his breath, too soft to catch. The chamber buzzed again with alien chatter, but the air was not the same anymore. Something had cracked. And then, a voice came from the corner. It was not from a senator, not from a commander, not from a diplomat. It came from a man no one had been looking at. An old janitor, dressed in plain gray clothes, stood by the far wall. He had been sweeping quietly all day, ignored by everyone. His mop leaned against the wall now as he looked up. He spoke in the same tongue. His Arabic was slow, deep, but strong. Naam, Asmayuk. Yes. I hear you. The sound froze the chamber. The young delegate's eyes widened in shock. His lips trembled. The alien stared, confused, trying to understand what had just happened. The other humans avoided each other's eyes. The janitor did not move closer. He just stood there, his back straight now, his tired hands folded calmly in front of him. His face carried years of silence, but his eyes burned with something ancient, something heavy. The aliens whispered among themselves. Some asked their machines to translate again, but still the words failed. The chamber seemed smaller now, tighter, as if every breath carried weight. Who is he? One alien hissed. Why did he answer? Another demanded. No one knew. The janitor had worked in that chamber for years, invisible as the furniture. He was the one who cleaned the floors after the grand speeches, who carried out the trash when debates ended. He was a man of no importance, a shadow in the background of power. But at that moment, he was the only one who had spoken back. The silence stretched long, until the old man finally bent down, picked up his mop, and turned away again. He did not explain himself. He did not smile. He simply returned to his work, as if nothing had happened. But nothing was the same. The young delegate sat frozen, his chest heavy with emotions he could not name. He felt as if the old man had answered more than just his words. He had answered his fear, his loneliness, his desperation to be heard in a place where no one cared. The aliens kept staring at the janitor, then at the humans, then back again. Suspicion lingered. A storm had started, though no one could see it yet. And deep inside, behind his quiet face, the janitor knew something he had not spoken. He knew why the young man's words mattered. He knew what message had just been sent in Arabic. It was not random. It was a warning. And he was the only one willing to answer. The council chamber never fully returned to normal after that moment. The aliens tried to push forward with speeches and votes, but the tension was sharp, cutting through every word. The young human delegate kept his head low, embarrassed, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. Yet his eyes often drifted toward the corner, where the old janitor had returned to his work as if nothing unusual had happened. But everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard it. When the meeting ended, the alien leaders left in groups, their voices sharp with suspicion. The human delegation avoided questions, shaking hands stiffly, pretending calm. Soon the chamber was empty, its giant glowing walls dimming to a softer light. Only the janitor remained, slowly pushing his mop across the polished floor. The young delegate lingered. He walked toward the old man, his steps unsure, his voice shaking. You understood me," he whispered. "You answered when no one else did." The janitor lifted his eyes, the mop stopping in place. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in the same deep Arabic voice, he replied, "Of course I understood you. You were not speaking to them. You were speaking to someone who remembers." The young man blinked, confused. "Remembers? What do you mean?" The janitor leaned on the mop, his shoulders heavy with age. His gray hair framed a lined face, but his eyes burned with a soldier's fire. "Long before you were born, I carried orders in the deserts of Earth. I was a soldier, and my orders were in Arabic. Those words you spoke were not just words. They were a signal." The young delegate's heart pounded. He remembered exactly what he had said, "Do you hear me?" It was a question, but to the janitor, it was more. I didn't mean to," the young man stammered. "It just slipped out. I don't even know why." The janitor's voice lowered, almost a growl. "You spoke from your soul, not your mind. And I heard you. But more than that, I heard what you were trying to hide." The young man's chest tightened. He had not planned to say it, but for weeks he had carried a fear he could not put into the council's endless debates. A fear of something moving in the dark of space. He had read classified reports, whispers of fleets gathering where no fleets should be. He had wanted to scream at the council, but protocol kept his mouth shut. Until his heart forced the words out in Arabic. The janitor saw this in his face. He nodded slowly. "You know something is coming. You are not wrong." The young delegate swallowed hard. You know too?" The old man's eyes grew distant, as if staring through time. "I fought wars when humans were still only fighting each other on Earth. I saw things buried, hidden by governments, ignored by leaders. I know the signs. And I know the sound of desperation in a soldier's voice. That is why I answered." For a moment, silence filled the vast empty chamber. The young man felt small before this janitor, who suddenly seemed much larger than his simple clothes and mop suggested. Finally, he whispered, "Who are you?" The janitor's face softened with pain, and he gave a small, sad smile. "No one. Not anymore. I was a captain once, a long time ago. My name is nothing here. To them, I am just a man who cleans their floors." "But why hide? Why not speak?" the delegate pressed. The old man shook his head. "Because the council does not listen to men like me. They listen to titles, to uniforms, to gold on the shoulders. I am forgotten, and that is how I have survived." The young man wanted to argue, but he felt the truth in those words. The council never listened, not even to official human voices. What chance did a janitor have? Yet beneath that pain, the old man's eyes still carried steel. He straightened his back and said quietly, "Still, someone must prepare. You spoke the signal. I will answer it. Whatever is coming, we cannot wait for them." The young delegate shivered. "You think war is coming?" The janitor leaned closer, his whisper cutting like a blade. "Not war. A storm. A storm that will burn worlds. And he motioned to the empty council seats, will keep arguing while it devours us." The young man felt his knees weaken. He had feared this, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. He looked at the old janitor, the man who had been invisible until today, and realized the truth: this man knew things. This man had seen things. And maybe, just maybe, this man was the only one willing to act. At the far end of the chamber, the doors creaked open. Another janitor entered, wheeling a cart. The old man fell silent, his expression blank again, as if nothing had been said. He picked up his mop and went back to cleaning. The young delegate stood frozen, his mind racing. He had come here to represent humanity in politics. But now he wondered if his true duty was something else. Something far more dangerous. As the lights dimmed and the chamber emptied for the night, he heard the janitor's last whisper in Arabic, low enough for only him. Prepare yourself. This was only the beginning. The words followed him into the dark, heavy as iron. The Galactic Council met again the next day, but the chamber felt different. The alien leaders still raised their voices, still debated in their proud languages, but something invisible hung in the air. The memory of the Arabic words had not faded. The janitor's calm reply haunted those who had witnessed it. Rumors spread quickly. By evening, the council halls were filled with whispers. Why did the human servant speak? Was it a code? Was it rebellion? Even among the humans, questions grew. Some delegates pretended not to care, but when they gathered in their private quarters, their voices shook with unease. They wanted to bury the moment, to pretend it was nothing, but they knew better. A single word spoken in the wrong place could start wars. The young human delegate who had spoken in Arabic could not sleep. The janitor's eyes, sharp and knowing, would not leave his mind. He had tried to tell himself it was madness, that an old man with a mop could not possibly matter. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The janitor had understood something no one else had. The next night, he searched for him. He found the old man alone, sitting on a low bench near a maintenance hall. His mop rested beside him, and his hands were folded, calm, as though he had been waiting. You came, the janitor said softly, his voice steady. I had to, the young man whispered. Everyone thinks I made a fool of myself. But you knew what I meant. The janitor nodded once. His eyes carried the weight of memories too heavy for words. What is it? The young man asked. What's coming? The old man's gaze drifted to the far walls, as if he could see through them into the stars beyond. When I was young, before I became what you see now, I fought in battles that were never spoken of. We thought we were fighting each other, but in truth, something else watched from the dark. Something old. Something patient. And now, I hear the same signs again. Fleets gathering where there should be none. Ships disappearing on the edges of mapped space. Signals cut off before they can reach us. It is a storm, and it is closer than they want to admit. The young delegate shivered. He remembered the classified reports he had read in secret. Reports the council dismissed as errors or accidents. But the old man spoke of them as if he had already seen the future. Why won't anyone listen? The young man asked, frustration shaking his words. The janitor gave a bitter smile. Because they would rather argue than act. Empires built on pride cannot imagine they will fall. They think if they speak long enough, the danger will wait politely at their door. The young delegate lowered his voice. Then what do we do? For the first time, the old man leaned forward, his eyes fierce. We prepare in silence. The council will not move until it is too late. But humans know how to survive storms. You spoke the signal, and I answered. That means we are not alone. There are others who remember. Old soldiers, forgotten like me, scattered across the stars. They will rise when the time comes. The young man's chest tightened. The thought of hidden allies, of warriors hiding as janitors, miners, or farmers, it sounded impossible, yet strangely powerful. But, if you're right, billions could die before the council admits the truth. The janitor's eyes darkened. Yes. That is why we cannot wait. Their conversation was cut short by footsteps. Two alien guards walked past, their eyes cold as they studied the humans. They said nothing, but their stares carried suspicion. The young man waited until they had gone before whispering again. Why did you answer me in Arabic, in front of everyone? The old man's expression softened. Because Arabic was the language of my first orders, the first time I was told to fight. And because I wanted you to know you were not alone. You thought no one would answer. But I did. The words struck deep. The young man felt tears sting his eyes, though he blinked them back. The janitor stood slowly, lifting his mop again. But before he walked away, he said one more thing. Remember this, they may not listen now. But when the storm comes, they will remember who warned them. And they will look for someone to lead. Be ready when that time comes. The young man's heart pounded as he watched the janitor walk back into the shadows of the hall. He wanted to call out, to demand more answers, but the weight of those last words kept him silent. The whispers of war were growing louder. And for the first time, the young delegate realized he was standing at the edge of something far greater than politics. Somewhere in the dark, fleets were moving. Somewhere in the shadows, an old soldier with a mop was waiting. And soon, the galaxy would know the truth. For weeks, the whispers grew stronger. Reports came in of trade ships vanishing in the dark between stars. Outposts sent their last signals, then fell silent forever. The council dismissed it all. Navigation errors, they claimed. Pirates, they said. Every excuse was spoken in polished voices. But behind the curtains, fear gnawed at them. The young human delegate knew better. Every missing ship matched the warnings he had read in secret reports. And every silence in the council chamber confirmed what the janitor had told him: no one would act until it was too late. And then, too late arrived. It began at dawn on a distant colony world. The planet was green and calm, its cities built along silver rivers, its people busy with ordinary lives. Then the sky split open. An alien fleet poured out of hyperspace, dozens of ships shaped like blades, black against the light of the sun. They moved with deadly precision, cutting through the planet's defenses as if they were nothing. In minutes, satellites burned, orbital stations cracked, and the cities below felt the fire rain down. The news reached the council within hours. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien leaders shouted, their voices a storm of panic. Some demanded retaliation, others demanded retreat. None had answers. None had a plan. The humans sat silent, their faces pale. They remembered the janitor's words. The storm is coming. Now it had arrived. The young delegate could no longer sit. He rose from his seat, his voice carrying across the chamber. We told you. We warned you. And you laughed at us. The chamber silenced for a moment, the echoes of his cry hanging heavy in the air. But then the shouting began again, louder than before, drowning him out. At the back of the room, unseen by most, the old janitor leaned on his mop and shook his head. His eyes carried no surprise. Only sorrow. That night, in a quiet corridor, the young delegate found him again. His voice shook with anger. They won't listen. They're too busy fighting each other while people are dying. The janitor placed a hand on his shoulder. His grip was strong despite his age. I told you. Empires cannot imagine their own weakness. But we are not bound by their blindness. There is still a way. The young man searched his eyes. What way? Tell me. The janitor led him through the dim halls of the station, past doors marked for staff, down into the underlevels where few council members ever walked. The air smelled of metal and oil. Machines hummed quietly in the dark. Finally, he stopped at a locked storage bay. With a flick of his wrist, the old man keyed in a sequence the young delegate did not recognize. The door opened with a hiss. Inside were crates. Not of cleaning supplies, not of tools, but of weapons. Old human rifles, armor, sealed packs marked with faded military insignias. The young delegate stared, stunned. You how? The janitor's face was grim. I was not always a janitor. I kept these hidden, waiting for the day the council's weakness would doom us all. That day has come. The young man's voice dropped to a whisper. You've been preparing for years. The old man nodded once. A soldier never stops preparing. Not if he has seen what I have. He lifted a rifle from one of the crates, its surface worn but well kept. His hands held it like an old friend. The young delegate swallowed hard. But what can we do? It's an entire fleet. The janitor looked at him with fire in his eyes. You think I am the only one? No. Across the stars, there are others. Old soldiers in plain clothes. Farmers who once held rifles. Engineers who once flew warships. They are waiting. And when the storm came, they would rise. The young delegate felt his breath catch. It was impossible, and yet, he believed it. He had seen the truth in this old man's eyes. Suddenly, the lights above flickered. An alarm rang through the station. Voices shouted through the intercom in dozens of languages. The alien fleet was no longer just attacking colonies. They had arrived in council space. The station shook as distant explosions rumbled. The council chamber erupted in chaos once more, leaders screaming, guards rushing. Some called for surrender. Some shouted for evacuation. None stood firm. But in the shadows, the janitor locked his rifle into place. His eyes burned with resolve. The storm is here, he said softly. And this time, I will not stand aside. The young delegate looked at him, fear and courage battling in his chest. He realized the truth: history would not remember the speeches of the council. It would remember the men and women who stood when no one else dared. And at the center of it all stood a janitor, once forgotten, now ready to fight again. The council station shook with every distant explosion. The enemy fleet had arrived without warning, black ships cutting through the system's defenses like paper. Panic ruled the great chamber. Leaders shouted over each other, their translators struggling to keep up with the chaos. Guards ran back and forth, their orders clashing, their faces pale. The young human delegate stood in the middle of it all, his heart pounding. The council had no plan, no courage, no unity. They would collapse before the enemy even reached them. He felt despair rising until he saw the janitor. The old man was not afraid. He moved with steady steps, his rifle slung across his chest, his gray clothes replaced with armor pulled from an old crate. It was scratched, faded, but it fit him like a second skin. His eyes burned with the same fire he had carried in silence for decades. The young delegate followed him out of the chamber, away from the screaming politicians. Down in the lower halls, they were not alone. Dozens of humans waited. They were not soldiers in uniform. They were cooks, engineers, maintenance staff, ordinary workers of the station. But in their hands were weapons, old but serviceable. They had come when the janitor called, answering his voice without hesitation. The young delegate stared in disbelief. Who are they? The janitor's voice was calm, strong. Forgotten men and women. Once soldiers, once warriors. When the wars ended, they were cast aside. But they never lost their strength. They were only waiting for the time when the galaxy would need them again. That time is now. The group stood ready, their faces hard, their bodies tense. They were scarred by age, by labor, but their eyes carried the memory of battle. The young man felt his throat tighten. These were the invisible ones, the people the council never noticed. The ones who cleaned their halls, fixed their machines, and carried their supplies. Now, they stood as the first line of defense. The janitor raised his rifle. Listen to me. The enemy is fast, but they are not invincible. They believe this station will collapse under fear. We will prove them wrong. We will hold this place long enough for civilians to escape. We will fight where the council will not. His words echoed in the silent hall. For a moment, the young delegate thought no one would respond. But then, one by one, the forgotten raised their weapons. A quiet murmur filled the hall: for Earth. For family. For survival. And then the alarms screamed louder. The enemy had breached the outer defenses. The storm was here. The battle came swift. The black ships unleashed fire into the station's shields. Enemy boarding craft pierced the hull, spilling troops into the corridors. The station trembled with each impact. The Forgotten stood ready. The first clash was in a narrow maintenance tunnel. The enemy stormed through in perfect formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons humming. But they did not expect resistance here. They did not expect janitors, cooks, and engineers to stand against them. The old man gave the signal. His voice carried like steel. Fire! The corridor erupted. Old rifles thundered, grenades burst with blinding light. The enemy staggered, their perfect formation breaking under the fury of humans who fought not for orders but for survival. The young delegate fired too, his hands shaking, his breath ragged. He was no soldier, but beside the janitor, he found courage. Each shot felt like a declaration that humanity would not go quietly. The enemy pressed harder, wave after wave. The Forgotten fell back step by step, holding choke points, sealing doors, setting ambushes in the dark halls of the station. Their tactics were simple, but their will was unbreakable. In one hall, a group of alien guards saw them fighting and stopped in shock. They had expected chaos, surrender, collapse. Instead, they saw humans, workers, and janitors standing like soldiers of legend. Some aliens joined the defense, inspired by what they saw. Others fled, ashamed. The janitor never wavered. Even when blaster fire scorched the walls around him, he stood tall, his commands sharp and clear. His gray hair glowed in the firelight, his rifle steady in his hands. To the Forgotten, he was not a janitor anymore. He was their captain again. In a rare moment of quiet, the young delegate asked, "Why do you fight like this? After all these years?" The old man's eyes softened, though his hands never left his rifle. "Because once, long ago, I failed. My family, they were lost in a war I could not stop. I swore I would never let it happen again. Not while I still had breath in my body." The words struck the young man's heart like a blade. He understood then, this battle was not just survival for the janitor. It was redemption. The storm raged through the station. The council leaders cowered, still shouting, still arguing. But in the lower halls, among the smoke and fire, the true defense was being fought not by rulers, but by the Forgotten. And as the enemy pressed harder, the janitor knew one truth: they might not live to see tomorrow. But they would make the galaxy remember them. They would stand until the last breath. The station groaned like a wounded beast. Fires burned in the corridors, smoke curled up through broken vents, and the sound of gunfire echoed endlessly. The Forgotten fought with everything they had, their old rifles blazing, their bodies holding the line against an enemy that seemed endless. The young delegate crouched behind a shattered barrier, his hands trembling as he reloaded his weapon. His ears rang, his chest burned, but his eyes kept finding the old janitor. Even in the chaos, the man moved like a commander. He barked orders in short, sharp Arabic words the enemy could not understand, but every human around him obeyed instantly. "Yomin. Left flank, now. Iltazam. Hold the line." The enemy tried to adapt, but the code confused them. They could not read the rhythm of the fight. Every time they thought they had pinned the defenders, the janitor's voice cut through, and the humans shifted like a single body. For the first time, the invaders hesitated. The young delegate realized something profound. The janitor was not just giving orders, he was teaching them to fight in a way that only humans could. It was not polished, not perfect, but it was alive. It carried heart, fire, and willpower that no empire could crush. But the enemy had numbers. More boarding craft slammed into the station, pouring soldiers into the halls. The defenders were pushed back, step by step, until their final line stood just outside the council chamber itself. Inside, the alien leaders cowered. They had not lifted a single weapon. Their proud speeches were gone, replaced with silence and fear. Some prayed to gods no one else knew. Some begged for mercy. None looked ready to fight. The young delegate stumbled into the chamber, his face streaked with soot. "Get up," he shouted at them. "If we fall, you all die with us. Fight." But no one moved. They sat in their high seats like statues carved from cowardice. Behind him, the janitor entered, his armor scorched, his rifle smoking, his gray hair soaked with sweat. He looked at the leaders for only a second, his eyes cold. Then he turned his back on them. "They are finished," he told the forgotten soldiers in Arabic. "We are the only line left." And they all understood. The enemy stormed the great chamber, their black armor shining, their weapons ready. For a heartbeat, the air froze. Then the janitor raised his rifle high and roared a single word in Arabic. "Cattle! Fight!" The chamber exploded with fury. The forgotten charged forward, their voices echoing, their shots blazing. The council chamber that had once been filled with speeches now shook with battle cries and gunfire. The janitor fought like a man reborn. Every step, every shot, every command came from a lifetime of war carried in silence. He shielded the weak, pulled the wounded to safety, and struck down enemy after enemy with unshakable precision. To those who followed him, he was no longer a janitor. He was their captain, their leader, their answer. The battle raged for what felt like forever. The defenders fell one by one, but they never broke. The chamber floor was slick with smoke and blood, yet still they stood. And then, suddenly, the enemy faltered. Confusion spread through their ranks. Their ships outside were under attack. Human reinforcements, called by hidden signals, awakened by old soldiers scattered across the stars, were arriving. Fleets long thought powerless now surged with firepower. The forgotten had bought the time they needed. The invaders began to retreat, their perfect order broken, their confidence shattered. One by one, their ships pulled back into the void. The storm was broken. Silence returned to the council chamber, heavy and choking. Smoke curled toward the high ceiling, broken weapons lay scattered across the floor, and the bodies of the forgotten lay among the fallen enemy. The young delegate staggered to his feet, his vision blurred. He saw the janitor kneeling, his rifle fallen beside him. Blood stained his armor, his breath shallow. Yet his eyes still burned with fire. The young man rushed to his side. "Stay with me. We won, they're leaving." The old man gave a faint smile. "No, you won. You and the others. I only answered when no one else would." Tears filled the young man's eyes. He gripped the janitor's hand. "You saved us all. You saved the galaxy." The old man's gaze drifted to the chamber seats, where the alien leaders sat in shameful silence. With his last strength, he raised his voice, not in English, not in the council's tongue, but in Arabic, the same words he had spoken on the first day. "Na'am, asma UK. Yes. I hear you." The chamber froze. This time, everyone understood. The machines finally caught up, translating the words across every screen. The meaning was simple, but the weight was enormous. Yes, he had heard the cry for help. Yes, he had answered. And then, with the faintest smile, the janitor closed his eyes. The council remained silent. For once, no one dared to speak. The forgotten had written history with their blood, and the galaxy would never forget it. The young delegate stood tall, his voice breaking as he turned to the chamber. "Remember this day. Remember who stood when all of you hid. Remember the janitor who answered when no one else would." His words echoed through the chamber, and for the first time, the leaders bowed their heads. In the silence that followed, one truth became clear: humanity was no longer invisible. They were no longer weak. And they had spoken in a voice the galaxy could never ignore again.